This is not just a story of murder. It's a nightmare straight out of a horror movie. A young woman with a bright future, brutally stabbed 27 times, strangled with Christmas lights, all because the two people closest to her believed killing her would fund their dream film. Betrayal, greed, and unspeakable cruelty collided in one of the most shocking cases in American history. Stay with me, because this isn't just another crime story. This is the most haunting, heartbreaking, and unforgettable case you'll ever hear. A young woman was found dead inside her own home. At first glance, detectives believed the case would be easy to solve. Yet the deeper they dug, the stranger it became. The truth was eventually uncovered, but no one could have foreseen just how disturbing it would be. Randy Trimble was born on December 15, 1974 in Virginia. An only child raised by a single mother, she grew up with a love for the arts, playing the flute, acting in school plays, and performing in the band. After high school, she enrolled at Bloomsburg University in Pennsylvania to study speech therapy, a field that allowed her to combine discipline with her passion for helping children. Her mother worked multiple jobs to keep Randy in school, and Randy repaid that sacrifice with hard work. She excelled academically, eventually earning a scholarship that covered her graduate studies in full. While in college, she met Brian, the man she would later marry. But just before their wedding, Brian was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, a devastating illness that would change both of their lives. Many would have walked away. Randy did not. She promised to stand by him no matter what the future held. The couple settled in Camp Hill, Pennsylvania, where Randy built a solid career at a local medical center. With her income, she purchased a house, and together they dreamed of starting a family. Randy even took on a second job, determined to build financial security in case Brian's health deteriorated. January 10, 2003 began like any other day. Randy, then 28, worked her hospital shift until 5 p.m., then headed to her second job. By the time she returned home, Brian had already gone out to meet a friend. He came back around 8 p.m. to a house shrouded in darkness. Something felt wrong immediately. Inside, the place was in disarray. Items strewn across the floor as though someone had been searching for valuables. Calling out for his wife brought no response. When Brian reached the garage, the horrifying reality came into view. Randy lay on the floor in a pool of blood, a strand of Christmas lights wound tightly around her neck. Paramedics could do nothing but declare her dead. Detectives took over the scene, but clues were scarce. There were no signs of forced entry, no weapon left behind, and nothing obvious pointing to the killer. Forensics dusted for prints and gathered evidence, while Brian reported that cash and jewelry, including Randy's gold diamond ring, had been taken. The autopsy revealed the true horror. Randy had been stabbed 27 times. The killer had attempted strangulation, but failed. There was no evidence of sexual assault. On the surface, it appeared to be a robbery gone wrong, especially with a window left unlocked. But investigators were troubled. The sheer brutality of the attack didn't fit the profile of a simple break-in. From the beginning, they suspected something far more personal, and soon their focus shifted to the person closest to her husband. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support means a lot to us and helps us grow. A huge thank you to everyone who's been watching. Friends and family admitted to investigators that Randy and Brian's marriage hadn't been perfect. Most of the tension revolved around Brian's illness. Randy, ever practical, was determined to save money and prepare for the worst, while Brian resisted the idea of living in constant anticipation of decline. He wanted to hold on to a sense of normalcy, while she planned for the future. Those differences sparked frequent arguments, enough, in the eyes of detectives, to suggest motive. But the timeline didn't fit. The medical examiner placed Randy's death at approximately 7:30 p.m. At that exact time, Brian was sitting in a cafe an hour away, surrounded by witnesses who remembered seeing him there. Police confirmed the alibi through customers, staff, and travel times. Simply put, there was no way he could have committed the murder. Randy's family also defended him, insisting he could never have harmed her. Detectives quietly agreed. Brian's multiple sclerosis, though still in its early stages, had already begun to limit his physical strength. The brutality of the attack, 27 stab wounds, seemed well beyond his capability. With Brian effectively ruled out, investigators were left with nothing. Forensics had turned up no usable fingerprints, no DNA, no weapon. The trail was cold. Believing the crime was personal, detectives dug into Randy's inner circle. Friends, colleagues, neighbors, no one could name a single enemy. She lived for her family and her work, and nothing suggested a hidden conflict. Weeks passed with no progress, until detectives, frustrated and empty-handed, circled back once again to Brian. Though his alibi remained airtight, his behavior in the aftermath was unsettling. Soon after the murder, he relocated to another town to be closer to his family, stopped showing up to work, and cut all contact with Randy's mother, despite their previously close relationship. Then came the spending. Brian splurged on a new TV, an Xbox, expensive furniture, and countless other luxuries. When questioned, he shrugged it off with a chilling remark. Grieving can get expensive. He explained he was expecting insurance payouts for the stolen jewelry and for Randy's death, and in the meantime was dipping into the savings the couple had built. The spending spree raised eyebrows, but not enough to implicate him. Detectives needed more, so they turned to his workplace for insight. Brian worked in IT at an insurance company, and colleagues confirmed what police already suspected. The marriage had been strained. One woman told investigators that Brian often complained about Randy's strict control over finances, how she scrutinized every expense, leaving him feeling suffocated. She added that just weeks before Randy's death, Brian openly talked about filing for divorce. Then, abruptly, he reversed course. Suddenly, the complaints stopped, and he began telling people everything was fine. Divorce, he insisted, was no longer on the table. Before the interview ended, the co-worker suggested detectives speak with someone Brian had grown especially close to, a man named Blaine. Blaine also worked in the IT department, and he and Brian had bonded over video games and horror films. Blaine had even written a script for a low-budget project inspired by the Blair Witch Project, a dream he and Brian discussed constantly at work. But in the weeks before Randy's murder, something shifted. The chatter about games and movies stopped. Instead, the two kept to themselves, speaking in hushed tones, as though guarding a secret no one else could hear. Detectives began to suspect that Blaine might know more about Randy's death than he was letting on. But instead of hauling him in right away, they decided to take a different approach. If Blaine was involved, Brian was the link and the key to breaking the case wide open. They maintained steady contact with Brian, disguising their persistence as routine follow-ups. By then, he was used to the constant questioning. But this time, detectives asked him to revisit the crime scene and walk them through the night he discovered Randy's body. Brian agreed, yet as he retraced his steps, his story began to unravel. Weeks earlier, he had told police he never touched Randy, that he immediately called 911. Now, standing in the garage, he claimed he had held her hand, even pulled her into his arms. Other details didn't line up either. The inconsistencies may have seemed small, but to seasoned detectives, they were red flags. From that moment on, the strategy shifted. Detectives kept Brian under constant pressure, checking in, tapping his phone, shadowing his every move. They wanted him nervous, always aware that the police were watching. By early May, 5 months after Randy's murder, they were ready to turn the screws tighter. Brought in for another interview, Brian was confronted with everything. The contradictions in his story, his sudden spending spree, the rumors from co-workers, the cracks in his marriage. Then came the line that changed everything. "We know you didn't kill Randy, but we also know you know who did." The room went quiet. After a long pause, Brian asked his mother, who had accompanied him, to step outside. When she was gone, he made his move. He was willing to talk, but only if prosecutors agreed not to pursue the death penalty. Detectives accepted. Brian finally confessed. His marriage, he admitted, had been deteriorating. He resented Randy's strict control over money and the constant feeling that he was being managed rather than loved. Years of frustration had built to a breaking point. Then came Blaine. The two bonded over horror movies, and Blaine shared a script he had written about 5 hikers in the Appalachian Mountains who unleashed the vengeful spirit of a dead man. Brian was enthralled. He wanted to be part of the project and even helped shape the script. The two began planning a low-budget production, but low budget didn't mean free. Blaine estimated they'd need more than $10,000 to get the project off the ground. Blaine couldn't come up with the money. Brian offered to bankroll it himself, dipping into the savings Randy had carefully set aside for his medical future. He believed once the film succeeded, he could replace the funds with interest. Randy, however, flatly refused. To her, it was reckless, a waste of the money she'd sacrificed to save. She also worried about Brian's health. The shoot would mean days trekking through the Appalachian wilderness, something his condition wouldn't allow. In the end, Brian withdrew, leaving Blaine furious but undeterred. Blaine scraped together funding by maxing out credit cards, his own and his wife's. With over $18,000 in debt, he forged ahead, hired actors, and spent a week filming non-stop in the mountains. On the surface, he was elated, but the debt destroyed his personal life. When his wife discovered what he had done, she left him, taking their infant son. Still, Blaine clung to the dream. He believed the movie could save everything, but without money for editing and promotion, the project was dead. That's when Brian returned to the picture. He still wanted in. He still wanted the dream. But there was one insurmountable obstacle: Randy. Together, Brian and Blaine came to a chilling conclusion. If they wanted access to the savings, there was only one way. Randy had to die. In the months that followed, Brian and Blaine began piecing together what they believed would be the perfect crime. Drawing inspiration from the horror films they loved, they devised a plan that was chillingly straightforward. Stage Randy's death to look like a robbery. Not only would it disguise their involvement, it would trigger insurance payouts, one for the stolen jewelry and another $100,000 from Randy's life insurance. To protect Brian from suspicion, the alibi was built into the plan. On the day of the murder, both men left work early and drove to Brian's house. Together, they ransacked the place to make it look like a burglary gone wrong. Then, Brian headed to a nearby town to meet a friend, his cover story, while Blaine stayed behind, waiting. When Randy walked through the door, Blaine struck. He first tried to strangle her with a cord, but Randy fought back fiercely. Overwhelmed, Blaine grabbed a knife and stabbed her again and again, 27 times in total. He then fled the scene, discarding the rubber gloves he had worn to avoid leaving evidence. Roughly an hour later, Brian returned home and dialed 911, feigning shock at the discovery of his wife's body. But behind closed doors, he admitted even he was disturbed by the savagery of the attack. A few days later, Blaine recounted the murder to him in graphic detail, making Brian physically sick. When detectives asked how he could sanction his wife's death, Brian's cold response stunned them. He claimed he only wanted to spare her the pain of divorce. That confession was enough to secure his arrest. But the case was only half solved. Without hard evidence, Blaine remained untouchable, and investigators knew Brian's word alone wouldn't be enough in court. With a warrant in hand, police searched Blaine's car. Inside, they found a receipt that raised immediate suspicion. On the very day of the murder, Blaine had purchased rubber gloves, work gloves, a black hoodie, and black pants. Tracing the same credit card, investigators made a breakthrough. It had also been used to buy a large knife. When detectives obtained an identical model and presented it to the medical examiner, the blade matched Randy's wounds precisely. Still, Blaine appeared to have an alibi. Two friends claimed they had been with him at his apartment around 7:30 p.m., the approximate time of the murder. That timeline, if true, would have cleared him. But when police checked a gas station receipt from the friend's stop after visiting Blaine, the truth came out. The timestamp read 8:30 p.m., not 7:30. That discrepancy gave Blaine more than enough time to kill Randy and return home before anyone saw him. With the evidence finally aligned, detectives arrested Blaine. Up to that point, they'd had almost no direct contact with him. When officers arrived at his door, Blaine collapsed, fainting on the spot. Despite the mounting evidence, Blaine initially clung to his innocence. But when prosecutors announced their intent to seek the death penalty, he folded. In exchange for taking execution off the table, Blaine struck a plea deal. He admitted to killing Randy, saying he had hoped to secure $20,000 from her life insurance to pay off his crushing debts. In the end, both Brian and Blaine received life sentences without the possibility of parole. To this day, they remain behind bars. Randy's death, however, was not in vain. Her mother channeled her grief into action, founding a nonprofit dedicated to helping victims of domestic violence. The organization continues its work today, providing aid and hope to hundreds of people in need. Be sure to let us know what you think of the story in the comments below. And if you like this video, smash the like button and don't forget to subscribe. A playlist is going to pop up right now with more videos you'll love. See you guys next time.